So, this morning, picture this. It's 1986. I know not everybody in the room can remember 1986, but most of us can. 1986, it was the summer before my 7th grade year, and I got a chance to go to kids camp. So here I am, 12 years old. I am headed to kids camp. It was the first and only time I'd ever been to kids camp. A good friend of mine I'd met that summer. We'd spent the whole summer together, and we're like, let's do this. We found out about it. We thought it'd be so much fun. So we were so excited. And we get to kids camp on Monday, and it's just great. There are kids everywhere. It was 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and there was just the energy of all those children from all over Alaska were at this camp. There was going to be swimming and boating and all this stuff. And so I can remember the excitement of the event. And as I'm there registering, it's Monday afternoon, and in the cafeteria, I see her. I see the girl of my dreams. I didn't even know she was the girl of my dreams until I saw her. And there she was, and it was amazing. And I was like, I got to find out who this girl is. And so I found out. Found out her name was Jennifer. Now, I had never met anybody named Jennifer at that time. I just thought that was the most amazing name. I was like, what a beautiful name. That's incredible. Her name is Jennifer. And I was, this was it. 6th grade, 12 years old. This is the one. I'm getting married. This is the one. And this was like I said, Monday afternoon. I had met the one. We had chapel on Monday evenings, and I remember the boys would sit on the left side of the chapel, and the girls would sit on the right. And I sat far enough back so I could stare at the back of her head during chapel. I know that's a little weird, but hey, I had to be able to see her the whole time. And so I'm like, this girl is just incredible. And she had a great back of the head too. And so, just the whole, and so that happened Monday evening. Tuesday, saw her around, always, just kind of, I'm sure I was very stealthy. My wife tells me I'm not stealthy at all, but I'm sure I was casually looking at her all the time at every opportunity. And so I constantly glancing. So my good friend Matt, who was also there, he had met the love of his life the day before, and so they were dating now. And so I was like, Matt's girlfriend knew Jennifer. And so Tuesday evening, after I'd spent the entire chapel service staring at the back of her head again, Tuesday evening I told Matt, I said, you got to find out. Does Jennifer have a boyfriend? You got to find out for me. This is huge. I got to know this. And so Matt went to find out. And so I went to bed that night just still on cloud 9. This is the love of my life. This is it. And so Wednesday morning I find out from Matt, nope, she does not have a boyfriend. Yes, that's because that's me. That's me. I'm hit. And so shortly thereafter, sometime around lunch, I find out that this weirdest thing, apparently when a girl randomly asks another girl if she's got a boyfriend, the other girl apparently wants to know why and who's interested in finding out. And so my good friend Matt's girlfriend told Jennifer, well, Dwayne wants to know if you've got a boyfriend. And that moment that came upon my life and the striking words when I found out, well, she said you're a dork. The overwhelming devastation in my life. Now, it wasn't until years later I realized that how adorable being a dork is. But at the moment, I was not able to own that. At the moment, it was just the worst thing I'd ever heard in my life. I mean, I remember this was like the longest rest of the Wednesday on into Thursday. I mean, I thought this camp was never going to end. She thinks I'm a dork. How awful. I mean, seriously, how awful is that? And I was devastated. My heart was broken. I was never going to find love. This is the worst thing ever. Now, by Thursday evening, we had done something else, and I mean, my life went on, and obviously, and my wife loves my dorkiness, so I'm good. But I got to tell you, there are times in our lives, and we all know this. We've all had those moments that seem to last for an eternity. When you're stuck in this moment, you're like, am I ever going to get through this moment? Is there anything beyond this? And I know this lasts like 6 months or so. Lots of people have had lots of those moments. They're like, am I ever going to get beyond this moment? And so this morning, I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about, the long game. And our key point, our thought for today is, your now is not your forever. Your now is not your forever. Because so often, we get into moments where it feels like this moment, this now, is never going to end. And it was great. The whole idea of the long game, I actually just finished a book called Sway. And in the book, it's a why rational people make irrational decisions. And, why do people who, and, we've all been there. We've made a decision, or we've had a conversation with a kid who's made a decision, and you ask them, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Or we've asked ourselves that, what was I thinking? Why did I make that decision? That was an awful decision. But we've all been there. We've all had those moments where we make irrational decisions. And, the thing is part of the book they talked about, and they were talking about to investors. And they said, the investor said, in investments, people often forget they're in a long game. They're not in a moment-by-moment game. They forget that there's a whole long, this is like a year's thing. And I think that what happens to us in our moments is often we get so caught up in the moment that we forget that we are in a long game, that our life is made up of many, many moments and not just a single one. And so like my first big point of this is, and I'm going to come back to it again and again, is the first thing we need to do is recognize that you are in a long game. As we're going through life, one of the things we need to remember, recognize is, hey, I'm in a long game. It's bigger than just this moment. Now, as I was thinking through this, I was like, okay, I was talking to Levine and I had this conversation, and I said, often you look at biblical stories and they're full of great moments. I mean, we think about, you got Moses, parting the Red Sea. That's a great moment. They're doing all that. Moses had quite a few great moments, water from the rock, all this stuff. He had great moments. We have people like Noah building the ark. That's a good moment in his life, that saving his family and all that. You had Gideon defeating the Midianites. He's, just with a small army, they did an incredible thing that God worked through them. David did all kinds of great stuff. He had great moments, killing a giant, killing a lion, killing a bear. The guy was, and all the battles he won and all the things he did as a king. He had some great moments. We had, Esther became queen, saved her people from destruction. That's a great moment. But it was interesting as I was thinking through these, and I'm like, okay, so looking at these different people, I'm like, yeah, they had great moments, but if you look up before the moment, there was often stuff going on that could have easily sabotaged the moment. Moses before the Red Sea, there was many points in his life where he could have gotten caught up in the moment and not had the better moment. And so just as we're looking, we want to look at kind of like this morning I want to take a broad look at some of the nation of Israel as they came out of Egypt and some of the moments that could have totally ruined them and what God had for them. And so, Pastor Dave, we've been talking for the last 10 weeks through the 10 Commandments, and a fantastic series. If you missed any of it, you can go to our website. They're all on there, asburyag.com. It was a great series, just talking about God building a moral people, and from love the Lord your God to you shall not covet, and just talking about loving God, loving your neighbor, and all in that in between. So it's a fantastic series. And so, but as the nation of Israel, they're coming out of Egypt. That God had just done some miraculous things. We know, he did these. There was the 10 plagues. He rescued them out of Egypt, and they are going. They had several moments within the first few months of leaving Egypt that it was like they'd forgotten everything before, and they were focused on now. And it totally could have hijacked everything. So we're just, the first one. So as we're recognizing we're in a long game, Now, the first one comes in Exodus chapter 14, 10 through 12. So God had brought them out of Egypt. They're traveling there against the Red Sea. And we read in Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 12. As Pharaoh approached, so Pharaoh had decided, yeah, we let all our slaves go. Let's go get them. And so grabs his army, heads over there. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." So here they are, just rescued from Egypt. God had done miraculous stuff. And they are against the Red Sea, and they're like, oh, now we're going to die. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. You could have just killed us back there and saved us the walk. You know, thank you. And of course, you know, and we know Moses looked to God. God told him what to do. They parted the Red Sea and went across it. Fantastic thing. But in that moment, they were like, okay, all hope's lost. We're dead. So what I find interesting is chapter 15 of Exodus is this song of Moses and Miriam, where they sing this song celebrating what God had done. And then chapter 16. So in chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, says this: the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. So this is like 2 months after they left Egypt. So this is not even like a really long time. And God has already done some incredible things for them. You know, not just the parting of the Red Sea, but all the other stuff he's done up to this moment. So this is 2.5 months after that. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." So they're in the desert and they're like, hey, there's no food. You're going to starve us. So already they've said, hey, you're going to kill us. We're against the Red Sea, and God took care of that. God's done all this other stuff. So now here they are. They're in the desert, and you're like, oh, now you're going to starve us. Thank you. Once again, could have killed us while we were still in Egypt and saved us to walk. And so I love it because it's in that moment, you know, you go on to read in that chapter that God sends quail in and manna, and the whole rest of the time they're traveling throughout Egypt, on their way to Israel, they get food every day. So God provides for them again. So then you jump over to chapter 17, and you know, not too much farther later, it says, "But the people were thirsty for water there. They grumbled against Moses and said," once again, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt and make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Now, what I find so incredibly fascinating about this, they would still be getting the daily doses of quail and manna. I mean, they're getting food provided out of nowhere every day. They've had God do all kinds of incredible things up to this point. And they're like, we're dying of thirst. Why did you make us leave? We could have been just fine slaves over there in Egypt. And we know that throughout this time, as Pastor Dave was talking about with the Ten Commandments, you know, God was developing a people. He was teaching them. But it's so interesting because, you know, in those moments, they're like, this is the end. We're dead. And we know, I mean, how many of us can really make great decisions when we're starving and we're like hungry? I mean, you know, there's a reason the whole statement of hangry is, you know, a joke, and, you know, because we don't. I mean, okay, how many of you have bought absolutely ridiculous things when you're hungry and grocery shopping? Yeah? I have come home, looked through the things I bought, and like, what was I thinking? I don't even know what to do with this. What do I do with this? I'll open it up and pour it out and give it to the kids. in the midst of uncertainty, we don't always make the best. We kind of like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? We kind of start to get this inward focus. When we're hungry, when we're uncertain, when we're, if you've had sleepless night after sleepless night, we don't always, the world starts to look dark, starts to look like there's no hope, no light. We get this. I mean, these are great ways to forget that you're in a long game. And I know this. I know that, we, as just even experiencing this as a parent, you get that, the lack of sleep, and you're like, okay, is this ever going to end? Are they ever going to get past this point? Are they ever going to get past that point? Are they, it's funny, because as we travel through life, don't we do that? We get to a point, we're like, am I ever going to get past this point? And then things are going well, and then, am I ever going to get past this point? Am I ever going to get past this next point? And the great thing is remembering that, hey, we are in a long game. And it's even better than that, which I'm really excited to get to here in just a couple moments, but we're in a long game. So I want to give a couple thoughts on the long game. And the first one of these is, some thoughts on the long game is, emotions are real and should be questioned. And it's just interesting, Pastor Dave and I get in these great discussions, because I am a person who, I'm an internal processor, which is fun when I'm speaking to people, because I have this constant conversation going on in my head, and sometimes I forget which one of me is talking out loud. Like, did I just, no, I was thinking that. I was thinking if I should say that. And so it's always fun for me, because I'm like, yes, I should say. And so Pastor Dave and I have this discussion, because I don't always like the extreme emotions. And having children has taught me how good emotions are and how positive they are, but I don't always handle them, especially in other people. I mean, I've had some interesting experiences in life with people and their emotions, and not sure what to do with them at that time. And so I've learned a lot, and I've grown a lot, and God's helped me. And like I said, Pastor Dave and I have some great conversations about emotions. And but one of the things that is, we think through the long game, is our emotions are very real, and they should be questioned. I mean, I think about my journey as a 12-year-old at camp. I mean, that was love. That was the real deal there, as my 12-year-old self. And my father-in-law, I loved it. He said one time, puppy love is real to a puppy. It's a real thing to that puppy. And so, it's such a true statement. Your emotions in the moment are very real. God gave us emotions. They're great, but they're not always good discerners of what is really going on around us. And so just being aware of that, our emotions are real, our anger, our frustration, they're ours, our joy, our sadness, all of that is real, but they are not always good discerners of reality, because sometimes our reality can be skewed by our emotions. One of my favorite Psalms, it says, "Why so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God." It's like this statement of, okay, why are you down? Come on, put your hope in God. Do this thing. Don't let the emotion dictate the response. And so the first thought on the long game is, emotions are real and should be questioned. And just in the midst of that, a question I try to ask myself is what I'm seeing in the midst of my feelings true? Is what I'm seeing in the midst of my feelings true? And there have been times like, being married, Levita and I will have a conversation, and she might say something, and then in the moment, my feelings are like, okay, that kind of hurt. And then I have to stop and say, okay, is Levita in the habit of injuring me with her words? No. So I probably misunderstood her. But, because there's those moments. Am what I seen in the midst of my feelings, is it true? And if it is, then you can go from there. But, it's a great question to ask. Emotions are real and should be questioned. The second thing, which is just huge, and I know we all know this, but we are often only seeing other people's highlight reels. And, Facebook, social media is a great example of this. People post this stuff on social media. They post all this good stuff they're doing. I'm doing this with my kids. I'm doing this with my family. Hey, we're doing this and that and another thing. And this is like a real issue. People scroll through Facebook, and there's like real depression issues that happen with people constantly scrolling through, and they begin to look at what all these other people are doing and thinking, wow, I do not measure up. I'm not that great of a parent. I don't create those sort of arts projects. In fact, if my kids pull out an art project, I'm like, no, your mom's not here. We're not doing art. No art in this house. But it is a real thing. We see people's highlight reels. We see the best sides of them. We see the smiles. Occasionally the other stuff pokes through, but for the most part, we love to show people our best side. And this is such an important thing to remember, because we often will compare ourselves to those around us. I mean, it's this natural thing we do when we look at, look how amazing Ed is. We do, but we see the good that people are projecting out there, and often look at that because we know all our faults. I mean, like I said, I have owned the entirety of my dorkiness, and I know it. I'm okay with it. My wife loves me, so that's good. But we see other people's sunshine, and we see our not, and think, I wish I could get it together like that. Wish I could do that. But it's so important for us all of us to remember and remind ourselves, I am only seeing people's highlight reels, not seeing y'all don't get to see Grumpy Dad with my children, where I'm like, I'm done. I mean, okay, so reality, when I've told my kid good night 6 times, and they come in again, and they're like, Dad, we forgot to pray. And I'm like, okay, you're not interested in praying in this moment. You're just not going to bed. But then there's that other side. Okay, I can't tell people I'm refusing to pray with my children. It's like, that's just low, kid. But seriously, so this happens all the time. Dad, we forgot to pray. I told you to go to bed. Go to bed. I just want you in bed, please. Okay, we'll pray. But it's so true though, right? We see the highlights, and we think, okay, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. But we all have the dark grumpy side. And so the third thought. So emotions should be questioned. Emotions are real and should be questioned. We are only seeing other people's highlight reels. The third is the only true consistency is God. As you look through life, the only and this is the good thing I mentioned earlier that I said I was going to come back to. Is we are in a long game, but here is the great thing, that we are actually in a longer game than a lot of people realize. Because their long game is just their time here on earth, and they're like, this is all I got, this is it. But we are in a long game that began before the foundations of the earth and will continue through all eternity. And that is the only real consistency, is God. His sovereignty. The fact that, God is on the throne. God is in control. In the midst of COVID-19, God is on the throne. 80 years ago, during World War II, God is on the throne. During the Renaissance, God's on the throne. The Romans were ruling the world, God's on the throne. The Mayans over doing their thing, God is on the throne. Back when the Egyptians were ruling their known world, God is on the throne. Before time began, God is on the throne, and God will continue to be on the throne through all eternity. He is. His sovereignty, who He is, His presence is the only consistency. Several conversations I had back in March and April with people. One thing that kept popping up, and it was just this statement. It said, I think more than anything that the whole coronavirus thing helped people realize is that, or even helped people realize, people began to realize is just how little control we have. And one of my favorite statements, I tell my kids this, and just is control is an illusion. We really have no, I can't even get my kids to go to bed. What sort of control do I think I have over anything else? But control is such an illusion. It is really just this, this thing we think we have, we like to think we have, we like to feel like we have because it helps us process. But there was a song that came out in the 90s that said, we are all just one phone call from our knees. We're all just one phone call from crying out to God, like, what am I going to do? And, the thing is the only consistency is God in all things and who He is. And the great thing is He, through Jesus, calls us to be a part of the long game. That we can join with Him in the plan that He has for all eternity and say, God, I want to be a part of that. I want to join with what you're doing. And that is such, for me, that has been such a relief through life when I've been able, I know it's not always easy. And we all know this. We get to the moments, and the moments scream so loud, all that's going wrong in the moment, and it's hard to stop and okay, this is just a moment. God is on the throne. God, I need your help to get through this moment. Please help me to keep walking forward, to keep going, to keep doing what you would have me do. But I tell you, and this is a statement I've made a lot in my life, I don't understand how people who don't have God in their life do this, because I rely so heavily upon His strength in my life. And so the only true consistency is God is on the throne. And I love it because when Moses met God in the burning bush. So he killed somebody in Egypt. He ran, fled for his life. He's in the wilderness. He got married, had kids. He's a shepherd. He sees this burning bush, goes there, and he meets God. And one of the first things God tells him, He says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's like, I am the God that was the God of your forefathers. I'm the same one. And then in Revelation, we see, at the end of the Bible, we see where, on the throne and the creatures crying out, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. That He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His presence with us is something we can count on. So, recognize we're in a long game. The second thing, because I love practical stuff, and as we go, just go through this, the second thing is build systems in place when your moments are eternal. So when you're in this moment that seems to drag on forever, build things in place ahead of time so that you can process through the emotions. I think as I was thinking through this, a system that's been in place in my married life since the beginning that we don't even really think or talk about. But when Levita and I were first married, we had decided we would never spend more than $20 on any single item without a conversation. Now, we have since then spent more than $20 on items. But I got to tell you, 20-some years later, however long I've been married, 22 years almost? 22 years? 22 years later, I still will go to the store, and if I see something that's around $20 or more, then I'm like, hey, I want to get that. And I was like, I will still, all of a sudden, there's this thing in me that just pauses. And I think about, do I really need this? Do we really need this? Now, sometimes, I'll get, waste money on stuff. We all do. But I got to tell you, it was a system we put in place that without even thinking about it, it causes me to question my purchases. Because I think, do we really need this? Yes, we do need that movie. But it was a system we put in place so that, because I am the type of person, especially if I'm having a rough day, I like to go buy things. I like to go buy people things. I'm like, hey, you need this. Let me go buy this for you. And so I love to do that. And so that system has saved us lots of money, I know. But put systems in place to remind you that you're in a long game. This could be, we look at the people of Israel. God did this with them. You think about this, the Ten Commandments, the way they're structured reminds them of who God is and how they should act around others. Their entire calendar, if you read Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and the festivals that are built into the Jewish calendar remind them constantly of who God is and his faithfulness to them. The weekly calendar, every week they have Sabbath, a day to recognize and remember who God is. And these are systems, and does it work? Yeah. Just look, this is thousands of years later. And these systems have helped remind the people of Israel, the Jewish people, of who God is and his faithfulness to them throughout all time. And so I say this is something, I think about this. Okay, what can I put into place to help me when I'm in the moment not feeling good about anything, and I'm sure I'm going to, I'm never going to get through. It's always going to be this bad. We do that. It's part of why we get together at church. It's a beautiful system that we have as we gather together to encourage one another, to worship God, to strengthen one another up. This is why it says, we should not, in Hebrews, don't neglect. Don't stop meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. We need each other. That's one of the reasons this whole time has been so bad on people, is they have not continued to connect with people. Even those some people who, you can't come out for one reason or another. You still need to do everything you can to connect with somebody. Don't let yourself become isolated, because we need people, we need the systems and things to help us journey through life together. So recognize we're in a long game. Build systems in place, and part of that is just making the decision ahead of time. I love just as Joshua at the end of Israel, had gone through the desert. They're in Canaan. 40 years later, the time of Joshua comes, and he leads the people in their conquest of the land. Gets to the end, he gathers them all together, reminds them of their commitment to God, and then tells them. In the end of Joshua, he says, "Okay, here we are. Choose who you're going to serve. Are you going to serve the gods over the river, or are you going to serve God? You choose. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." It's like, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. And so, builds those systems in place. And then last, because I think it's so important, remember, you're in a long game. We're in a long game. It's bigger than this moment. It's so much bigger, because we are in the game, the game that started before time began and will continue through all eternity. We're in this. And I love it because God invites us to be a part of what he is doing through all of time. And that's exciting. So the worship team's going to come up. We're going to close with this song here just in a moment called "Yes, I Will." And I just encourage you, I want to make that your prayer today. Yes, I will worship God. Yes, I will. I will choose to do this through the lowest values, because he has been faithful, and he will always be faithful. Let's pray, and then we'll sing this song. Lord, I thank you so much for who you are. Lord, you have been and you continue to be faithful, and just pray that you would help us to remember all that you've done and all that you continue to do. And to choose to say, yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valleys. I will praise your name, to make those decisions. And Father, for those who are in a moment that is seeming to drag on through all eternity, is this moment ever going to end? Lord, I just pray that you would remind them of your presence, that you would just rest upon them with your presence, that they would know your strength and your peace. And Father, just help us to live our moments for you. Through the highs and the lows, Lord, just pray that we would rest in you. Thank you so much for who you are. In your name we pray.